Symone Sanders-Townsend, host of Symone on MSNBC and former senior advisor to Vice President Kamala Harris. Republican strategist Jim Dornan and Betsy Woodruff Swan, national correspondent at Politico and an NBC News contributor. Thank you all so much for joining me here on the panel. So Symone, I want to start with you. You just heard those Republican voters. What do you make of what they wanted? Adults in the room? What do you make of this chaos on the Hill?
I mean, I hope that someone can do better than Kevin. He works with the Democrats and they oust him. That's ridiculous. That's what these folks are saying. Look, I think that you juxtapose what real people, is what I like to say, real people out there in America are saying, with the realities on Capitol Hill, and it seems like these are two different worlds. I do think that in general, Democrats, Republicans, independents, in the real world, they would like Congress to work for them and do their jobs. The problem is that this particular Congress, this particular House caucus on the Republican side, the minority of very loud voices have captured the power, if you will. And so the only way, I think, out of this, in a place where the Matt Gaetz and the Lauren Boeberts and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world do not have outsized influence, is, in fact, to snuff out their influence by working with the Democrats. I do not think, though, that in this current climate, that is something that any potential next Republican speaker would actually be willing to do.
No bipartisanship?
You know, I
Surely
think
you jest. Well, Jim, tell me, is it realistic to think of bipartisanship in this current Congress and this chaos on the Hill? How damaging is it to the Republican brand going forward?
Well, if the Republicans are going to allow 8 out of 218 or 221 to control their conference, then they deserve to lose. And I think Matt Gaetz just basically guaranteed that the Democrats will be taking control of the House next cycle. And I'm as a Republican, it's embarrassing to watch this. I mean, Kevin McCarthy didn't do anything wrong. He's just trying to keep the government running. That's a basic tenet of governing. And the fact that he got thrown out for that is ridiculous.
And Betsy, picking up on that point, what does it say about the current Republican Party that Jim Jordan is now the leading candidate for Speaker? Would this have happened several years ago, 5, 10 years ago? You know, what world are we living in right now?
No question that this is a dramatic departure from the way the GOP was very, very, very recently. The best way, I think, and the most important way to make sense of why things are the way they are on Capitol Hill right now is to look back to ancient history of 2021, when Republicans were supposed to have a wave election in the 2022 midterms. They were supposed to scoop up tons and tons of Dem seats. There were Republican operatives talking about a 20-seat majority, a 30, 40-seat majority. And there was very much a consensus among the pundit class that the midterms were going to be awesome for Republicans based on just the empirical data. But then Trump and his allies decided to spend those 2 years leading up to the midterm saying, hey, elections don't count. Don't vote. You can't be trusted when you put your vote in. Dominion, let's redo 2020 argle-bargle. And shockingly, that was not a successful midterm election message. And as a result, Republicans have a microscopic House majority that has rendered the Republican conference totally ungovernable. I think next week we're going to see revenge of the moderates. I don't think it's going to be pretty. And I think the tensions that exist right now are not magically going to go away because of a closed-door meeting.
So what do you make about Trump? There, for a short period of time, for like 2 seconds, there was this idea he could swoop in if it was even legally possible to be Speaker of the House. That went away. He endorsed Jim Jordan. How much power does he still wield over this Republican conference?
It's still a ton. There's no question. But I think it's less than he would have liked to. Trump certainly feels like he has an obligation to pretend he's running for any seat of office that anybody ever talks about him running for, which is why when he announced back in 2016, so many people rolled their eyes until the words literally came out of his mouth. Because if there's a possibility of him getting in the news, he takes it. But look, there's a reason that Jim Jordan is viewed right now as possibly the favorite, and at least among his fellow House Republicans, they see him as, without a doubt, Trump's chosen candidate, and they saw him that way before the endorsement, too. The second he announced, there was a perception that he was Trump's guy. Now, Scalise, of course, has these much longer-running, close relationships in the conference, and the question for next week is, who's more powerful?
Yeah, and Jim, I was going to bring that up with you. What about Steve Scalise? How does he bounce back from this Trump endorsement of Jordan?
Well, he does have built in, I think, what's the word I'm looking for? built.
Yeah, relationships, history.
Yeah. Thank you. Very much so. And I think he's given a lot of money to these candidates. I think there is some IOU in there. I think the fact that he's been in leadership both hurts and helps him. In my opinion, it helps him because he knows what it's like to do this.
And can Jordan fundraise as well as Scalise?
Well, I agree with that as well. No, I don't think so. And I think that's what they're going to miss most about McCarthy, especially if he leaves the House.
It just really feels like what might make a good speaker candidate within the Republican House conference is not what makes an actual good speaker of the House. The role of speaker has to be able to go in and sit at any table, whether the president is a Democrat or Republican, and cut a deal. A speaker has to be able to wield power over their conference so that when that speaker sits at the table, the people with whom the speaker is negotiating with knows that he or she can deliver their votes. The problem with Kevin McCarthy and the reason that he is now out is because he could not be trusted to have the confidence of his caucus. And I don't know if a Jim Jordan or a Steve Scalise, even for that matter, can do the same.
And here we are, just 42 days from another potential government shutdown. Should be interesting. We're looking to 2024. Are the panel of swing voters that we just heard from there, and also earlier in the program with Kristen's interview with some voters, talked about the possibility of a Biden-Trump rematch and this idea that they choose the lesser of two evils. What do you think about that, Symone?
Look, I think that this is language that has been parroted for a very long time, right? I remember going back to like Obama v. Romney, and folks are like, Romney is the lesser of, in some sense, is the lesser of two evils. And given what we now know to be true about Donald Trump and the current realities of the Republican Party apparatus, it seems fantastical to say that. There are, in my estimation, there are worlds apart Donald Trump and Joe Biden are. Yet, the way that we talk about our politics nowadays, it is a very both sides of ism. Every party is the same. Democrats are just slightly different. And I think that in the long run, that is going to be detrimental to President Biden and Vice President Harris in their reelection, because that is the sentiment that people have out there. I don't think it's accurate or correct, but that is how a number of people feel.
Look, we also talked about President Biden this morning, talking about the strong jobs report. Why do you think he's not getting enough credit for the economy? Because
I think when people open up their newspapers, when they turn on the news, all they hear is inflation, it's terrible, it's bad, prices are very high, and the president does not get the credit for the good things that the economy has done, and they have to do that work to talk about
it. Quickly, I think we have some of President Biden's speech a little earlier where he addressed this. Let's take a listen.
You all are not the happiest people in the world. What you report, and I mean it sincerely. It gets you get more legs when you're reporting something that's negative. I don't mean you're picking on me, or I'm just the nature of things. You turn on the television, and there's not a whole lot about boy saves dog as he swims in the lake. To say it's about somebody pushed the dog in the lake.
The president seems a little annoyed, Betsy.
Just a teeny bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a bit. It's challenging.
It's frustrating.
It's challenging because when the economy is good, when you get a pay raise, you don't think, thank you, President Biden. When the economy is bad and when you're struggling, you start looking for somebody to hold responsible for those challenges. And just in terms of human nature, the gravitational pull of a bad economy is always going to be, what could people in power have done differently to make my life better?
And I agree with you. I think that he's getting extended bad feelings towards the economy. He's still being blamed for inflation. The jobs reports the last two times have been pretty darn good. But I just think that it's an extension of where it was 6 months ago.
And how people feel.
That's right.
How people feel. At the end of the day, it's how people feel. And while GDP is up, right, wages are a little bit up. This jobs report, I think they were stagnant, to be honest. A lot of people still feel like they are struggling. And that feeling is what dictates a lot of what people say when the pollsters call them or when they're asked in a diner by our good NBC in beds.
All right, Symone, Jim, and Betsy, thanks so much for joining us here.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.